New South Wales Police have thwarted what they say was a potential mass casualty event after discovering explosives in a caravan at a property in Sydney's northwest. The Prime Minister has called it terrorism, and authorities fear the Jewish community was the target. Police are calling the development a significant escalation after a spate of anti-Semitic attacks across Sydney. The latest incidents came overnight with a Jewish school, one of 3 sites in Sydney's east, sprayed with graffiti. The Premier, Chris Minns, says 10 people have been arrested over the past week and a half over similar incidents and called targeting a school disgraceful.
It is utterly appalling and shameful that an individual would spray racist, hate-filled messages on a school. It tells you everything you need to know about how appalling these bastards are, that they would rip apart a school on one of the first days of school.
The caravan in Dural was found abandoned by a resident on the 19th of January, and after spotting what looked like explosives inside, police were called in. Officers found power gel explosives, which they say had a potential 40-metre blast radius. Police say it was enough to cause a mass casualty event, and they suspect the explosives were likely stolen from a mining site. Alongside the gel were anti-Semitic messages and the address of a Sydney synagogue. 2 people have been arrested on the periphery of the investigation, including the owner of the caravan, who police say was in custody on unrelated matters. Mr Minns says he was told of the discovery at the time. However, the government and police decided to withhold the information from the public until the operation was reportedly released to media. The Police Commissioner, Karen Webb, says the leak has hurt their investigation.
The fact that this information is now in the public domain has compromised our investigation, and it's been detrimental to some of the strategies we may have used.
Israel's Foreign Minister says the rise of anti-Semitic attacks in Australia is an epidemic and has called on the government to do more to stomp it out. On 702 Radio Sydney, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said progress is being made.
We remain concerned about this escalation. We're doing everything that we can. And the fact that people are being detained, arrested, charged, kept in the clink without bail indicates that that's the case.
Executive Council of Australian Jury co-CEO Peter Wertheim says the discovery at Dural is a disgrace to Australian values.
We're angry because we are seeing that the Australia that we have been fortunate enough to live in ourselves, a land of freedom, fair-mindedness, civilised norms of behaviour and the rule of law, is starting to slip away from us and from our children and from future generations.
Well, reporter Miles Holbrook-Walk is at the property where that caravan was discovered in Dural. Miles, what's the focus of the investigation at this stage?
Well, Ruby, there's several lines of inquiry, among them how explosives turned up in a caravan in this part of semi-rural Sydney. It's right on the edge where I am in Dural, but then thereafter as well, there's some close inspection of who as well may be connected to this incident. There's a belief by police and the Premier that there are people in the community right now who have knowledge of this incident and that they want them to come forward to assist them with their inquiries. I want to touch on a moment for the explosives discovered in this caravan. So, it's worth noting that there was a significant amount, enough to, if they had been detonated, produce an explosion with a diameter of 40 metres. It's huge, and as police said off the top, it is something that could have been a mass casualty event and that they believe could well have targeted a Jewish site, given some of the material discovered within that caravan. Secondly, the actual power gel that was discovered, it's typically used in mine sites, but very interestingly, an expert on minerals and professor and academic of this has told ABC Radio Newcastle that essentially power gel is quite an old material used in mining, and that these days mines tend to use other materials that are more towards the nitroglycerin type, which means in his hypothesis that if it was obtained from a mine site, it would be quite old stock, and if it was stolen from a mine site, for example, it could be as old as a decade. So it's some really interesting insights there from people who understand the way explosives are used within mining, interestingly. Of course, though, we do have to note that this is a police investigation that, although ongoing, is still very much in its infancy. We know from Karen Webb, the police commissioner, they are particularly frustrated that elements of this investigation have come out in the public, her saying that it has thwarted parts of their investigation that they wanted to be clandestine and covert so that those responsible would have limited insight into their operations. At the moment, it is worth noting some people are in police custody, including the owner of the caravan, on unrelated charges to this incident. As well, other people believed to be peripherally involved, Ruby, have already been arrested under Strike Force Pearl, a group that are investigating anti-Semitic incidents, but again, police flagging that they are believed to be peripherally involved to this incident, and no charges yet have been laid.
Miles, what do we know about the Jewish community's reaction to this incident so far?
Well, it's one of great alarm and deep concern, particularly for older Jewish people within the community. We've heard from the Executive Council of Australian Jewry this morning and just earlier saying that the last few months have been a living nightmare for many people, particularly in Sydney, that's been the site of various anti-Semitic attacks. But it's not just in Sydney that this is playing out. In Melbourne, Sarah Schwartz from the Jewish Council of Australia spoke about how alarming and triggering this can be for older Jewish people, those more likely to have memories of the Holocaust, either through family or themselves. And she spoke about how some older people in particular, as Jews, feel quite afraid even to practice their faith.
People are really, really scared in this moment. People are asking whether they can go to synagogues, to Jewish day schools. And, you know, for elders in our community who may be Holocaust survivors or the descendants of Holocaust survivors, there is an added level of trauma there, seeing these incidents play out, absolutely. You know, as there is for all racialised communities when we see these sort of intensifications of incidents of racism and hatred.
And Miles, how are these events playing out politically so far?
Well, we've seen the opposition make some more demands, including returning to some of its previous demands for mandatory minimum sentencing for certain offences that are believed to be hate crimes or religiously or ideologically motivated. Julian Leeser spoke to the ABC a short time ago and basically listed a range of areas he believes the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and the federal Labor government are coming up short.
How many more anti-Semitic attacks will occur on the Jewish community before the federal government will do absolutely everything in its power, using the resources it has available, whether it is the Human Rights Commission, whether it is the federal police and the security services, whether it is instituting a judicial inquiry into anti-Semitism on campus, whether it is pulling all of the agencies together, as James Patterson and Peter Dutton have suggested, whether it is introducing mandatory minimum sentences. This is not a government that has done everything that it can, and they are not my words, they are the words of Jewish communal leaders.
So that's Julian Leeser, the local member at a federal parliament for this part of Sydney, really saying that he thinks the government's dropped the ball. The federal government would strongly contest that they've managed this situation as well as they can. They've emboldened police through multi-agency operations and also held a national cabinet meeting just last week on these matters too. So several incidents that kind of unfolding here on the politics of it. Interestingly, Chris Minns, the Premier of New South Wales, has spoken about how he thinks Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has done a good job on this matter. They've been in regular communication. What's interesting about that, and another element we may see sharpened politically today, is the calls from the opposition to know when Prime Minister Anthony Albanese did first learn of this incident, as well as other federal government ministers. We know Chris Minns knew at the time of the incident occurring, and he implied that he's been in regular discussions with Anthony Albanese. When Anthony Albanese was asked what date he became aware of this incident this morning on ABC Radio Sydney, he declined to give a concrete answer. No doubt those questions will be put to him later today in a more direct fashion.